Welcome back to another episode of Worship Tech Tour featuring the Belonging Co. Church. In this video, you are going to get an in-depth look at their broadcast video system. Our tour guide in this episode is Corey Reynolds. He's a video director and he was the brains behind the entire system. I'm really excited for you to hear him explain in depth the types of decisions that they made from both a creative and technical, even theological standpoint as they built out their system. As always, check out our free worship ministry toolkit linked below this video for our latest recommendations on our favorite worship ministry gear for small to mid-sized churches. And don't forget to check out the Belonging Co.'s latest album, See the Light, linked below. Without further ado, get ready to learn a ton about cameras, lenses, rigging, video routing, switching, encoding, and recording, because Corey goes very in-depth in all of these topics.
In our main auditorium, we decided to go with all Blackmagic G2 Ursa Mini Pros. We did a lot of shootouts with a lot of really great cameras, from Canon to Panasonic to Sony's, and ultimately just decided from a cost versus outcome that Blackmagic was really the way to go. And so really through and through, we adopted kind of the Blackmagic ecosystem. Once we decided on the Blackmagics, then it was lensing and things like that. We chose the Sigma Arts for a lot of that stuff. And really part of the discussion when I came on was really trying to merge the idea of cinema and broadcast. And we're still walking that out and figuring out what that looks like. But we wanted to start with a large sensor, so that's one of the reasons we chose the G2 over the broadcast. And I personally just like that sensor better for the kind of stuff that we're doing. Now, some of our lenses are slower because we're so far away. We went with some pretty inexpensive ones, just more as like a proof of concept. But we've stayed really in the Sigma line, except for one of our Canons is the 17-120. We started off with that on our jib, but then wanting to help kind of bring more context to the room, we put a wider lens on the jib and then put the 17-120 on the dolly. And that's been a really cool thing to have that servo zoom going across as we're kind of going left and right. We have 8 cameras. We have 2 on sticks, one at front of house and one what we call our slash cam, which is just a side angle. Both of those are on platforms. Dolly jib. And then we have, traditionally we have 4 handhelds. This week we're demoing some equipment. So we have 3 handhelds and one of our other handhelds is in the sky for a cable cam. So we have really 4 lenses in the main room. On our 2 tripod cameras, it's the Sigma Sport lens, and it's 150 to 600. Pretty slow lens. I think it on the long end gets down to around f6, 6.5, something like that. And so those cameras are gained up pretty high, but we've had really good luck with the G2s. Even though we're gained up pretty high, the noise pattern is fairly appeasing, and so it hasn't been an issue for us. Something that would probably upgrade in the near future into a little bit of faster lens. And then we have those servered with the Tilta Nucleus, and those are powered off the camera. And so we've got a servo zoom and focus control there. So kind of an inexpensive way to servo some cinema lenses to make them work where you're not having to reach over to the lens all the time. Half of our cameras are on the Sigma Arts 24 to 70s and 70 to 200s. And our operators will use either monopod, they'll go handheld, or easy rig. And we're pretty flexible with how each operator wants to use those. A lot of our volunteers are professional filmmakers or work in the video space, and some have never used a camera before. And so we really have the gamut as far as operators on a service day. The 4th type of lens we would have is the Canon CE. It's a 17-120. And we originally started out with that one on our jib, decided to move it to our dolly, and then tonight even demoing with the Defy dolly, so servo zoom plus automated dolly, hoping for those butter smooth dolly shots. In trying to get as much context as we could for the room, we actually put a Tokina 11 to 16 on there as kind of a trial to see. So right now we're not doing a lot of zooming with the jib, and it's all kind of a we try something, see how we like it, and then adjust and move around. And so we miss having the JIT, being able to zoom, but we love that it gives us really the context of the room at 11 mil. So we're 4K 24p throughout. So we are running that down SDI, and with the URSAs, we can run one SDI to the switch and then a return video signal that allows us camera control for iris and then all your paint controls as well to help match the cameras. One thing I did that is a little more unorthodox and probably more in the cinema range of things is shading cameras is an art in itself, but shading the Blackmagic cameras is not like shading Sony's or Panasonic's. It's really different. So even though we have the shading controls in our control room, what I decided to do is I brought a chip chart out and shot each camera with each lens, and then pulled it into DaVinci, color matched everything, re-exported a per camera LUT, and loaded that LUT on each camera. So we're not having to, any adjustments we do are very fine-tuned or like emergency adjustments. Something, something just isn't looking right, or skin tone looks off or whatever, then we can adjust those minutely, but try to get a similar look, try to get a same look from each camera by doing it that way, and like that being our ground zero, and then making small tweaks from there versus trying to always paint on the boxes.
They're sending all of the camera feeds from the worship auditorium into their server room, where then eventually it's going to hit the video patch bay, their router, and then their video switcher. They conveniently have many, many panels all throughout the building where they can plug in the SDI cable from the camera into the panel, and then that's how it gets routed to the server room. They're using the Blackmagic 40x40 video hub and the Blackmagic Constellation switcher.
So the ATEM Constellation is a 4ME mixer, and if you think of an ME almost like a auxiliary on a sound console, it's another output. And there's a lot of things you can do with stacking MEs, and it can get really complex. But basically, the idea is MEs all run down, so they can be individual outputs, but they can also feed each other. So ME4 can feed ME3, 2, and 1, and ME3 can feed 2 and 1, and kind of down the line. But you can't take ME1 to ME4, so it kind of runs, if that makes sense. So it runs down. We have our ME4 set up as kind of an optional bank that we can use for different things. So we use it for all sorts of different things. ME3 is most of the time the output for our LED wall. So that controls, during worship, our MBox video server is going to that. During the message, we're using PVP. And we've been kind of dipping in the Resolume Arena world a little bit as well. And then ME2 is our in-room switch, and then ME1 is our online switch, or we'll switch on ME2 and bring ME2 into ME1 if we don't have two directors. But so yeah, you really do have four fully switched out, fully with transitions and wipes and DVEs and all that stuff on 4. Plus on the Constellation, then you have I believe it's 24 aux outputs that are hard cut. So you have just a ton of options, and with the Constellation, a lot of the benefits over some of the other ATEMs are it's got 4 multi-viewers, and it can have up to 16 different things showing on each of those multi-views if you want. So there's a ton of flexibility in how you set up the multi-viewer, which is really great, and gives you a lot of options that in other mixers are really just really expensive. From there, we have our shaders, and so we've got two of the Blackmagic control panels for that, which each control 4 cameras. So we have access to all 8. You tap the top of the shader and it comes up on the monitor with scopes, and you can make your adjustments separately so that what you're doing is not interfering with anything else that either the directors are doing. And you've got tally there too, so you can see what's online and what's not. So any adjustments you can make while the camera's not online, which is great. So traditional broadcast cameras would have a CCU controller. Blackmagic, doing their Blackmagic things, have worked all that into the switcher. And so that's why we run a return video SDI back to the cameras, is the switcher then all of that computing is done really in the switcher. The panels that are basically like a mouse and keyboard. They're just controlling the software, which is why you can do camera control from Blackmagic software as well. You don't have to have the hardware panels. And so that return video line gives us that, and all that computing and stuff is done in the switcher, and then communicating with the camera and making those adjustments actually in the camera. And then it's all controlled over IP. So anytime we add a switcher or want to move a switcher or whatever, it's just a simple Ethernet connection that goes into our production network and then controls it. We're actually looking at moving our in-room switching and graphics out of the control room so that we can do a separate experiences, like during offering and announcements, that maybe we split back to our online pastor to be able to do some things that would be more relevant to an online audience. Right now, with us all being in one room, we've tried it a couple times and train wrecked pretty hard. We've got producers and directors, and there was just all this and two different audio sources, and it was just like a bit of chaos. And so we've decided to kind of push pause on that till we can kind of figure out a better long-term solution for that. Right now we have two different panels that control that. We have an in-room panel and a online panel. Our online panel is the newer 2ME panel from Blackmagic, and then we have a 1ME that does it in the room. And part of our conversation was, with the jib and the cable cams and all this stuff, we really wanted to help elevate the experience of people watching online. But we've asked the question, is that distracting for people in the room? That really image magnification is at its core is meant so that you can connect with the person on stage. And then ultimately in church environment is, connecting people to the presence of God. And kind of setting that table. And so we kind of asked the question, just because we can have all these amazing shots on screen, should we? And I don't know that we've landed on an answer for that. And sometimes we go back and forth. There's some weekends where we don't have enough positions to staff 2 directors. And so we'll mirror them. And some nights, like you'll see tonight, we'll have 2 directors. So that's a different cut in the room that's maybe a little simpler and a little more connected to some of the tight shots. And the other cool thing about that is when we take a jib shot online, you see a tight shot on the screens, which is kind of cool versus just a mirror effect. We don't do it hard and fast. It's not law for us, but it's something that we've kind of experimented with to keep that in-room switch just a little simpler than what we would cut for online. We looked a lot at ROS switchers and routers, and I don't have the exact numbers, but it was basically like we could get 2 of everything Blackmagic and still be well under what we would have spent on ROS. Part of the conversation was, when you buy ROS, when you buy these high dollar things, that it's really a long-term solution. It's something that you might invest in and have for 10 or 15 years. And I think that there's places where that model is really appropriate. Where the belonging was when we purchased this equipment in 2020, we've just experienced this growth that was really hard to predict. Would we maintain that growth? Would it plateau? Would we be in this building for a long time? Would we, what was it? And so I was nervous to buy into a 10, 15 year product at that price point, because I just didn't know where we're going to be in 10 or 15 years. That was hard. So investing in Blackmagic gives us the opportunity to make a shift here in the next 5 years without breaking the bank. And if we were in a place of more predictableness, 2020 was unpredictable for everybody, that might change. And there is a quality and a reliability that comes with ROS and support that you haven't traditionally got with Blackmagic. And that's worth it to some people. We were kind of willing to take that risk, and we look at the cameras, we like the way it operated, and the price point allowed us to do a lot more, adding the jib, possibly adding these cable cams and dollies, and spending on some more of the toys versus just better infrastructure. So as I mentioned, we're 4K, 24p, throughout the entire church. And so one of the big questions we had was, how's that going to translate to encoding for online services and things like that? We've chosen to go with Resi for all of our online, and soon launching a second location, and so we'll be using them for our multi-site as well. And they were able to, in their Prism encoder, be able to take us from 4K 24p to 1080 24p to output to Facebook, YouTube, and we use Church Online as our platform for all of our broadcasts. And it has been flawless. I mean, we've had zero issues. We love the Resi product, and the encoding looks great. We were having a lot of problems converting it to 1080 before the encoder, and they did their magic and made us an encoder profile that actually allows the encoder to do that down conversion for us, and it looks phenomenal. Yeah, so for our recording, we use the HyperDeck, and we record everything at that 2160, 2398. We're also recording inside each of the cameras to CFast cards. One really cool thing about the Blackmagic sending the return video is it actually timecode syncs everything. So when we go into an edit, we literally drop the files into Premiere, right-click, sync to timecode, and we're up and running. There's no manually syncing stuff. And so that makes our post-production process on anything that we decide to edit later just a breeze. And even if we're putting that on our line cut as well as same time code. And so it's a really cost-effective way of doing something that works really well for us. We typically will record each camera every service because we're always multi-tracking, we're always recording, and you never know when something's going to happen that you would want to edit. And then we'll keep that for 2-3 months, and if we decided to not go back, then we'll go through the server and kind of archive or delete everything but the main cut. Some of the stuff that we know we're not going to use, there's no sense in holding footage of 8 cameras that you're not going to, use. That adds up really quick. One of my favorite things, and really what drew me to be a part of the Belonging just before I was on staff, just even to come here, was the way that this church stewards the presence of the Holy Spirit. It's not manufactured, it's not manipulated, it's stewarded really well. And so we don't know we don't plan for these moments to happen. Sometimes we have a good idea based on a set list of a song that, might, that has a history of kind of going places or whatever, but that's never really a part of our conversation. We're just kind of always rolling, see what God does in the moment, and then have that ability. So usually after a service, there's times where it's so obvious, it's just like, man, God moved in a powerful way and we got to capture that. And so we're like, hey, let's hang, everybody kind of almost knows, like, that was amazing, let's hang on to that. But usually there's a conversation between me, Sean, a couple guys, if there was a moment that they caught, and, we'll get a message or whatever, like, hey, can we get a line cut of this? So that's usually kind of the first thing of like, let's go back and watch it, and like, does it translate to, because sometimes what happens in the room is just special for in the room, and it doesn't need to be rebroadcast, or it doesn't make sense or whatever. That gives us an opportunity to kind of go back, watch again. Then it's like, okay, we need to remix the audio, anything to be fixed there, and then is the line cut gonna work, or do we need to go back and patch some stuff up there? So it's really just a conversation that we'll have, once a week. Hey, is there anything, as we're just kind of checking in through our meetings, or if immediately after a service, somebody will go, hey, we're gonna do something with this.
A big thanks to Corey for taking us on an in-depth tour of their broadcast video system. As I mentioned at the top of this video, check out our resources below in the description for our worship ministry toolkit, and also check out the links we have for the Belonging Co. worship and their latest album. Don't forget to like the video if you found it helpful or entertaining, share it with your friends in worship ministry, and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on future episodes of Worship Tech Tour. Thanks for watching. See you next time.